The laughter was overwhelming. It rolled through the grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly, a chorus of vibrations, pulses, and rhythmic flashes of light. Over 100 species had gathered, their biologies as varied as their worlds, yet all found unity in one thing: mockery. At the center of it, Ambassador Helen Carter stood unmoving. The human representative was alone, the sole emissary of a species that, to the rest of the universe, was an anomaly. She had expected ridicule. Humanity's admission into the assembly had been fraught with skepticism, but it was only now, in this moment, that they were becoming a joke. "You mean to say," chortled a crystalline entity from the Renkari system, their voice a shimmering echo, "that your species has remained bound to a single planet?" "Yes," Helen answered, her tone even. Another wave of laughter. A massive cephalopod from the Koth Dominion undulated its appendages in mirth, bioluminescent patches flickering with amusement. A member of the gaseous Araline drifted closer, its translucent form pulsing in disbelief. "What happens when your world suffers a catastrophe?" it asked, its voice like air escaping a cracked seal. "Where do you go?" Helen's gaze swept over them, her expression carefully neutral. "We adapt." More laughter. The assembly had seen countless species rise and expand, colonizing new worlds, spreading across star systems. To remain confined to a single planet was not just foolish, it was unnatural. "You live in a universe of endless possibilities," the Renkari delegate continued, their crystalline facets shifting in color. "Yet you choose to remain on a fragile rock, bound by gravity and chance." A four-limbed insectoid Zethan clacked its mandibles. "How have you not gone extinct?" Helen tilted her head slightly, a ghost of a smile forming. "That's an interesting question." The laughter faltered. Something in her tone, too calm, too assured, unsettled them. At the highest seat in the chamber, Grand Arbitrator Irlix of the Cathari Dominion had not joined in the amusement. Their species, older than most, had a long memory, and though the Cathari had never interacted with humans directly, they had studied their emergence from the shadows of obscurity. Now, Irlix studied Helen Carter. Unlike the others, they saw no shame in her posture, no insecurity in her presence. Humans were often dismissed as primitive, yet they had reached the stars, not through the gifts of a patron race or inherited technology, but through their own sheer defiance of natural limits. That in itself was troubling. The assembly's laughter faded into murmurs as Helen spoke again. "We may live on one planet, but Earth is different." "Oh?" The Renkari delegate's crystalline surface dimmed in skepticism. "And what exactly makes your dirt-covered rock so special?" Helen clasped her hands behind her back. "Come and see for yourself." A silence settled over the chamber. The idea was absurd. Why would any of them waste time visiting a primitive world? Yet, something in the way she said it, something in the way she stood unshaken in the face of their mockery. Irlix narrowed their dark, multifaceted eyes. "You offer an invitation?" Helen nodded. "If the Assembly truly wishes to understand humanity, come to Earth. See for yourselves why we have chosen to remain." The murmurs grew louder. The Renkari delegate let out a crystalline chime, the equivalent of a scoff. "You expect the greatest minds of the Assembly to journey to your backwater planet for a history lesson?" Helen's smile didn't waver. "If your people are so advanced, surely a short trip is of no consequence." A challenge, deliberate, precise. Irlix observed the way the room shifted, the way egos flared. To refuse was to concede, to admit that perhaps there was something worth seeing after all. The Grand Arbitrator made their decision. "The Cathari Dominion will accept this invitation," they announced. "I will personally lead a delegation." The chamber hushed. No Grand Arbitrator of the Cathari had set foot on an unknown world in centuries. If Irlix was going, others would follow, if only to ensure their own governments were not left in the dark. One by one, representatives from the great interstellar powers signaled their agreement. The Renkari, the Aralin, the Koth Dominion. Soon the hall resonated with the acknowledgement of a historic decision. Helen simply inclined her head. "Then we will prepare for your arrival." As she turned to leave, Irlix sent a private transmission, a direct link from their mind to hers. You hide something, human. Helen paused just long enough to let the weight of their words settle before replying. So do you. Yearlix watched her disappear beyond the chamber doors. For the first time since joining the assembly, humanity had the galaxy's full attention, and the galaxy had no idea what awaited them. From the observation deck of the Ketheri flagship Varthun, Grand Arbitrator Yearlix watched the blue-green world grow larger in the viewport. Other delegates stood beside them, representatives from the Renkari, the Aralin, the Koth Dominion, and half a dozen other empires. Some murmured observations to their attendants, while others remained eerily quiet, as if sensing something they couldn't quite name. Yearlix understood their unease. Something about this planet was wrong. It was subtle, just beneath perception, but present nonetheless. The Varthun's instruments reported gravitational fluctuations that had no clear origin. The electromagnetic spectrum rippled in irregular patterns, and the further they descended, the more Yearlix felt, not through their eyes or ears, but through an ancient sense buried deep in their species' evolution. Earth was watching them. They turned to Helen Carter, who stood at the deck's edge, her posture relaxed, her gaze fixed on her homeworld. "Your planet is unnatural," Yearlix stated, careful to keep their voice neutral. Helen glanced at them, her expression unreadable. How so? The Renkari delegate clicked their crystalline fingers, irritation creeping into their tone. "Do not feign ignorance. Our instruments detect anomalies, fields of energy and gravitational inconsistencies that should not exist." "Ah," Helen said, as if they had merely pointed out an interesting cloud formation. "You're noticing it already." The way she said it, so calm, so certain, sent a ripple of unease through the delegation. The Varthun touched down at Earth's diplomatic landing zone, a sleek facility on the outskirts of Geneva. As the delegation disembarked, the first shock hit them. The moment their feet, or whatever appendages they used, touched Earth's soil, a pressure settled over them. Not physical, not measurable, but perceptible all the same. The Renkari's refractive bodies dimmed, the Aralin's gaseous forms constricted, the Koth Dominion's bioluminescent pulses flickered erratically. The Ketheri, attuned to the unseen forces of the universe, felt it most profoundly. Vast, silent presence pressed against their minds, patient, observant, powerful. "What is this?" the Aralin delegate whispered. Helen turned to them, her gaze steady. "Earth." The delegation followed her into the facility, walking, through corridors of polished steel and reinforced glass. Outside, the city of Geneva stretched beyond the windows, its skyline a blend of old-world architecture and modern engineering. Yet even here, among human civilization, the presence remained. It was not hostile. It was aware. The Koth Dominion's cephalopodic representative shuddered. "Your planet pulses like a living thing." Helen glanced at them. "Perhaps it is." The delegation was taken to a conference hall where a human scientist awaited them, Dr. Elias Moreau, a physicist whose white hair and weary eyes suggested a man burdened by knowledge. He gestured to a holographic display behind him, filled with graphs, energy readings, and historical data. "You've all noticed it," Moreau said, skipping introductions. "The anomaly that exists across every layer of Earth's physical reality." He tapped a projection of the planet which pulsed with a slow, rhythmic glow. "We call it the liminal field." The Renkari delegate folded their crystalline arms. "Explain." Moreau adjusted his glasses. "The liminal field is a phenomenon that defies conventional physics. It permeates everything, our atmosphere, our oceans, our land. It fluctuates in response to thought, to observation. It behaves almost like—" He hesitated. "Like a mind," Yearlix finished. Moreau exhaled. "Yes." A long silence stretched across the room. The Aralin delegate, who had remained silent thus far, finally spoke. "We have encountered living planets before, worlds with biospheres that behave as single organisms. But this," their gaseous form quivered. "This is not the same." "No," Moreau agreed. Earth is not alive in the traditional sense. But something here is aware. It interacts with us. It adapts. The Koth Dominion's representative leaned forward. How long have humans known? Helen exchanged a glance with Moreau before answering. Since the beginning. Moreau nodded. Our oldest myths, our oldest religions, all of them reflect a subconscious awareness of the field. Early civilizations spoke of gods that listened, spirits that responded, forces that shaped reality. We dismissed them as superstition. He gestured to the hologram again. They weren't wrong. The Renkari delegate narrowed their glowing eyes. If this liminal field is so powerful, why haven't you harnessed it? Helen's smile was grim. Because we don't control it. We coexist with it. The delegation exchanged uneasy glances. Ehrlich, who had remained silent, studied Helen carefully. You invited us here for a reason. Show us what we are not seeing. Helen nodded. Follow me. She led them from the conference hall, deeper into the facility, until they reached a secure hangar. A transport awaited them. Without a word, she boarded, and the delegation followed, their unease growing with every step. As the transport lifted off, Helen finally spoke. We're going to the Amazon. The rainforest? The Renkari delegate asked, confused. Yes, she said, because that's where we found it. The transport cut through the sky, carrying them away from the gleaming city and into the vast, untamed wilds. Below them, the Amazon stretched in an unbroken sea of green, ancient and untouched, in places where no human had ever set foot. As they neared their destination, Ehrlich felt it. The presence, the liminal field, once subtle, now pulsed stronger. The air itself seemed denser, vibrating with a frequency that had no name. And then they saw it. A structure, impossibly old, nestled within the jungle's heart. It was not made of stone, nor of any material the delegation could recognize. Its surface shifted, dark and smooth one moment, textured and organic the next, and it was alive. The transport landed at the edge of the site. As the delegation stepped out, the air thickened, pressing against them like a living thing. The Renkari delegate staggered. The Koth Dominion's bioluminescent spots flared wildly. Even the gaseous Aroline recoiled. Helen stood at the threshold. Of the structure, her voice steady. This is what you've failed to understand. Ehrlich's heart pounding, took a cautious step forward. The structure responded. The surface rippled, shifting, acknowledging. A whisper, not heard but felt, brushed against their mind. Not words, not language, a presence, something vast, something old, and something that was waking up. Helen Carter led the way. Her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp, scanning the shifting patterns along the surface of the chamber. The alien delegates followed hesitantly, their forms tense. Even the Renkari, whose crystalline bodies had never known fear, dimmed their natural glow. Ehrlich, ever the observer, felt the weight of something indescribable pressing against their mind. It wasn't an attack nor an intrusion, it was curiosity. The structure, no, the presence within was aware of them. This place, Ehrlich murmured, their black eyes narrowing, it is not of human origin. Helen glanced at them. No. The Aroline delegate, their gaseous form quivering, whispered, How long have you known? Helen exhaled. Since before we knew what we were looking at. She gestured to the walls, which pulsed with a slow, rhythmic luminescence. We discovered this site centuries ago, buried beneath layers of earth and time. The deeper we dug, the more we realized we weren't uncovering ruins. She placed a hand against the wall. We were waking something up. The Renkari delegate, still skeptical despite the unease in their posture, stepped forward. What exactly is this? Dr. Elias Moreau, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was hollow, as if repeating knowledge that had haunted him for years. We don't know. The chamber fell silent. We've run every test imaginable, Moreau continued, staring at the shifting walls. Carbon dating is useless. The material isn't stone, isn't metal. It's adaptive, reactive, but never hostile. We've probed it with electromagnetic fields, exposed it to extreme heat, radiation, sub-zero temperatures. It never breaks, never deteriorates. It watches, Helen added. The Koth Dominion's representative let out a low, uneasy hum. Watches. Moreau nodded. It responds to thought. Not words, not touch. Intention. It learns. Early farm. I felt their stomach tighten. This was wrong, this was dangerous. They had seen ancient relics before, remnants of civilizations long vanished. But this wasn't a ruin. This wasn't a relic. This was waiting. The walls shifted again as if sensing the tension, the luminescence pulsed faster. Then, for the first time, something changed. A section of the wall receded, revealing an archway leading deeper into the structure. A faint hum resonated from within, a soundless vibration that crawled beneath the skin. The Aralyn delegate took a step back. I do not like this. Helen took a step forward. It's too late for that. She entered the passage, and after a moment's hesitation, the others followed. The corridor led downward, twisting in unnatural ways, angles that seemed impossible, geometry that bent perception itself. The deeper they went, the stronger the presence became, no longer a whisper but a force pressing against their thoughts. Ehrlichs clenched their jaw, focusing. Do not react. Do not show fear. At last, they reached the heart of the structure. It was a vast chamber, circular, the walls shifting between patterns and textures too complex to follow. But at its center stood something impossible. A sphere suspended in the air, pulsing with an energy beyond their comprehension. It shifted between states, matter and antimatter, light and shadow, existence and something else entirely. The space around it warped, bending the laws of reality as though they were mere suggestions. The moment they saw it, the presence turned its full attention upon them. Ehrlichs staggered. So did the others. The Renkari's crystalline body cracked along its surface. The Koth Dominion's bioluminescence flickered erratically. The Aralyn let out a sharp, shuddering exhale, their gaseous form losing cohesion. Then the visions began. Not images. Not words. Raw, unfiltered understanding. They saw stars die in an instant, their energy siphoned into something beyond sight. They saw worlds collapse, not from war, not from disaster, but from the mere presence of an intelligence too vast to name. They saw civilizations, millions of them, rise and fall, their histories erased in moments as though they had never existed at all. And then they saw it. Not in form, for it had no shape. Not in voice, for it had no language. A hunger, an intelligence so vast, so incomprehensible, that even the greatest minds of the assembly would be nothing but dust beneath its awareness. And it was here. Not buried. Not forgotten. Contained. The vision stopped. The delegation collapsed, gasping, shaking. Some wept. Some clutched their heads as if trying to force the knowledge back out. Helen remained standing. She had seen it before. Ehrlichs, their limbs trembling, turned to her, their voice barely above a whisper. What or is this? Helen's gaze was unreadable. A prison. A silence heavier than gravity filled the chamber. Moreau wiped his forehead, his hands shaking. Every major extinction event in Earth's history? They weren't random. They were resets, fail-safes. He gestured weakly to the sphere. This thing has been contained here since before our species existed. We've never known who built this prison, only that Earth was chosen to be its cage. Ehrlichs forced themselves to breathe. You knew. You all knew. Helen nodded. For millennia, we've lived alongside it. Every war, every empire, every scientific breakthrough, humanity has evolved under its shadow, adapting to its influence. Some of us have even learned how to speak to it. The Renkari delegate's voice was raw. Why did you invite us here? Helen exhaled. Because we needed you to understand. The Koth Dominion's representative growled, their bioluminescence flickering erratically. Understand what? Helen's next words sent ice through Ehrlichs' veins. That leaving Earth isn't an option. The weight of that statement crushed them. Humanity's refusal to colonize the stars had never been out of ignorance, never out of fear. It had been deliberate. The moment humanity truly left Earth, the prison would weaken. The moment humanity expanded, beyond its world, the cage would open, and whatever lay inside would wake. The walls pulsed again, faster now, as if aware that its secret had been revealed. The presence that had been patient for so long stirred. Unyielding turned to Helen, their voice fairly steady. What happens now? Helen's expression was unreadable. That depends on you. The chamber pulsed like a beating heart. The sphere at its center shifted, flickering between states of existence, responding to the revelation it had allowed them to see. It was no longer patient. It was waiting. Unyielding's mind raced. The implications of what they had witnessed, of what Earth had hidden for eons, shattered every assumption they had about humanity. They had mocked this species for remaining on a single planet, thinking them primitive. But now, standing in the presence of something beyond comprehension, they understood the terrifying truth. Humans weren't stuck on Earth. They were its jailers, and if they ever left, the prison would fail. The Renkari delegate, still trembling from the visions, stepped forward, their crystalline form dimmed to near opacity. "You should have told us." Their voice lacked its usual sharpness. It was raw, fragile. The assembly should have known. Helen Carter's expression remained unreadable. "Would you have believed us?" A bitter silence followed. None of them could answer. Moreau wiped the sweat from his brow, his voice hoarse. Every civilization that ever reached this point, expanding beyond their homeworld, faced this decision. Leave and risk it escaping, stay and remain in stagnation. He swallowed. Most chose to leave. The Koth Dominion's representative, their bioluminescence flickering erratically, exhaled. "And?" Moreau gestured toward the sphere. "You saw what happened to them." The realization settled like a dead weight in Unyielding's chest. The absence of ancient galactic empires, the ruins scattered across the universe, the sudden and unexplained disappearances of entire species throughout history, it all led back to this. This wasn't just humanity's burden. It was the universe's. "The UR." Harolin Delegate's voice wavered. "You invited us here for a reason." Their gaseous form pulsed in slow, deliberate waves. "What do you want from us?" Helen took a measured breath. "We need you to understand the cost of expansion, of progress. If the Assembly continues pushing humanity to join the stars, there will come a day when we leave. And when that day comes," she gestured to the sphere, which pulsed in response, "this wakes up." The Cathari did not believe in gods, but Unyielding had the distinct and horrifying realization that they were standing before something that was not a deity of mercy nor of justice, but of hunger. Their mind reeled. Could the Assembly stop human expansion? Could they afford not to? The Cathari Dominion had spent centuries ensuring galactic stability. They had settled conflicts, brokered, peace-steered civilizations away from self-destruction. But this was something else entirely. The Renkari delegate clenched their crystalline fists. "You expect us to accept this? To halt progress? To tell the Assembly that humanity must remain locked on this single world forever?" Their glow flickered in frustration. "That is not how civilizations work." Helen's gaze hardened. "Then perhaps civilization itself is the mistake." That statement sent a ripple of unease through the delegation. The Koth Dominion's representative growled, their appendages shifting. "If this is true, why have we never detected its influence before? Why has it never escaped despite humanity's advancements?" Moreau hesitated, then quietly, "Because we've kept it asleep." The Aralin delegate's form stilled. "How?" Helen exhaled, as if finally unveiling the last and darkest secret. "War. Suffering. Chaos. Silence." Unyielding felt the room contract around them. Moreau's voice was barely above a whisper. "The liminal field, the presence you all felt, it's not just part of Earth, it's part of us. Every time humanity has come close to true peace, true unity, the field reacts. Wars break out. Empires collapse. Cataclysms reset the balance. He swallowed hard. We don't know if it's intentional. We don't know if the entity is doing this, or if its very nature warps probability around it. But we do know one thing. Helen finished the thought for him. If we ever reach a point where we no longer fight, where humanity becomes one, it will know. She turned toward the sphere, and it will wake up. The realization hit them like a collapsing star. Humanity had not just been the prison guards, they had been the lock. Their suffering, their conflicts, their struggles, it had all been part of the mechanism that kept this thing contained. The assembly had always wondered why humans were so violent, so prone to conflict despite their intelligence. Now the answer was horrifyingly clear. Unyielding felt something they had not experienced in centuries: dread. The Koth Dominion's representative took a step back, their bioluminescence flaring in panic. Then the assembly must act. We must quarantine Earth, restrict its influence, prevent... Helen shook her head. That won't work. The Renkari delegate snapped. Why not? Because you've already seen it. Her voice was quiet, yet it cut through the room like a blade. It's in your minds now. It knows you exist. Moreau's face was pale. The more you understand it, the more aware it becomes of you. The walls pulsed again. The sphere flickered just for a moment, as if something inside had shifted, turning ever so slightly in its endless slumber. The realization sent fresh terror through the delegation. Unyielding felt a sharp, piercing certainty in that moment. The Cathari had spent lifetimes believing knowledge was the path to salvation. But here now, standing before something that defied all comprehension, they saw the terrible truth. Some knowledge was meant to be buried. A choice lay before them. They could leave. Earth, return to the assembly, spread the truth. But then every civilization would come looking, drawn by fear or arrogance, or they could make the hardest choice of all. Unyielding turned to Helen. You knew this would happen. Helen nodded. Yes. Moreau's voice was barely steady. This knowledge cannot spread. The Koth Dominion's representative shuddered. Then what do we do? Unyielding exhaled, heavy with the weight of what must be done. The assembly must forget. The Renkari delegate's glow pulsed violently. You suggest we erase this knowledge? Unyielding's expression was grim. We have no choice. They turned to Helen. If we allow humanity to expand, we risk everything. If we interfere too much, we risk waking it up. They looked around at the others. We do the only thing we can. We leave. We never return. We ensure no one else follows. Moreau closed his eyes. And we keep struggling. Helen nodded. For as long as we must. The delegation stood in silence, each of them grasping the gravity of what had just transpired. Unyielding turned to Helen. One last time. If we do this, if we let humanity carry this burden alone, how long do you think you can last? Helen's expression was unreadable. As long as...